Welcome to Main Street Mavericks, celebrating conversations with exceptional Main Street businesses who serve friends and neighbors in your community. Here's your host, Joel Helfer.
Good afternoon. This is Joel Helfer, Main Street Mavericks Radio. Welcome to another episode. Today we have a very special guest. He's known as the modern-day Napoleon Hill. His name is Corey Poirier, and Corey has a very distinguished background. He is a TEDx speaker, an international best-selling author, an award-winning speaker, and Corey has personally interviewed more than 3,000 super achievers, including Jack Canfield of Chicken Soul for the Soup, Darren Hardy, Tony Horton, Mary Smith, and John Gray. Corey, welcome to the show. Good afternoon.
Well, thank you ever so much for having me on, Joel. I'm super excited to be involved today, and hopefully maybe we can together make a little bit of magic happen today.
Oh, that would be a lot of fun, and it's fun to talk to you. I see you've done this before with 3,000 interviews.
Yeah, it's definitely not my first time being interviewed or in the interview realm, that's for sure.
Well, one of the things that you're known for is distinguishing and determining common traits and qualities of super achievers. Could you talk a little bit about that and tell us what your take is and what it takes to be a super achiever?
Yeah, absolutely. More than happy to do so. So I guess, the first part is in terms of where I spent my time learning about this and why it was, I guess, important to me and how it all started. I had a business publication back, I want to say, at this point now, it started in the second go-round. I had a newspaper when I was 19, but then it ran for a year. And then I launched a similar publication, and it was actually, I guess you would compare it to Success Magazine on a very small regional scale. And what I did by launching it, I ran it for over 5 years monthly. And what I did by launching it is I kind of allowed myself to gain some access to some people and minds I never would have been able to reach otherwise. So essentially, what happened was that I kind of set out and put a list together and said, I want to start interviewing these high achievers, what I call enlightened super achievers, world-class leaders, and figure out what do they do that's different. And also, I guess you could say, what do they do that's the same? So what do they do that's common amongst the top 1% high achievers? And what are they doing that's different from the people that are wanting to get there but are struggling with it? So I basically set out from that perspective, launched the publication, started interviewing people, and kind of never stopped. I became obsessed by it and with it. And so that's how I've sort of spent the last number of years is basically interviewing these top achievers, trying to decipher what's different about them, and let's say setting the questions up so that eventually what I'd be able to do is document it and then also go back and share the insight. So doing it in such a way that I'd be able to go say, okay, this is the most common trait, this is the second most common trait, these are the, the 5 most common traits, these are the habits, these are the traits. And so that was the goal of it and how I sort of approached it once I realized and recognized what I was actually doing. And then, so what did I discover? If I kind of look at, let's say, the top maybe 3 traits, if you will, I would say the first of those, I'm going to say reverse order. In other words, out of the 3, the least common, although it's still something that's common among these high achievers, would be that they essentially go all in. So we talk about distractions and focus, people that can avoid distractions, people that can focus. It's like they can do that but take it to a next level, if you will. So essentially, basically they can kind of go, okay, well, I'm with my phone right now or device, so I'm going to go all in with it. And then 5 minutes later, if they're with a person, they say, well, I'm with this person now, so I'm going to go all in with that person. They avoid the distractions that most people struggle with today. They're able to make you feel, if you're with them for 3 hours, like they don't own a cell phone. And that was a very big distinction for me, because in a time where so many people are hooked on their phones, and I would go so far as to say have an addiction to their phones, it's amazing to see this common trait that these top achievers have been able to not only break away from it, but go all in such a way that you would never think they owned a phone when they're with a person, and then go all in with their phone in such a way that you'd think they didn't know how to converse with people when they're with their phone. So going all in, whatever that means, meaning it can be more than obviously the phone. I use that as the extreme example because it's the one we most know about. But, it can be as simple as not thinking about the groceries while they're performing what might be the most important task of their day, where somebody else might be still lost in, I can't believe somebody cut me off 5 hours ago. So it's their ability to go all in. That would be the third most common trait. And I guess I'll ask you, Joel, do you have any questions on that one before I jump into number 2?
Well, it seems to me like what you're talking about is that super achievers have a tremendous ability to focus and be present with whatever they're doing. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly a focus ability. It's certainly a be in the present, be in the moment ability as well. So, I mentioned that idea of not thinking about the groceries or the person that cut them off and living in that exact moment they're in. That's absolutely a big part of it. So, why I use the term go all in is because that's really what they're doing. They're going all into that moment with everything that moment deserves. So it's like if they were performing, this is the biggest song of the night every minute. Every minute of their day is the biggest song of the night.
What do they use to measure what a super achiever is? Is it based on production? Is it based on money? Is it based on new clients? What's it based on that they use to determine whether or not they're achieving their goals?
Well, I'll say it this way. It's going to be different answers depending on the achiever. They're all going to have different metrics and measurements, but I'll give you the answer from my perspective based on chatting with them and based on studying them. From my perspective, how I decide, is this a super achiever? Is this somebody that's on the list, if you will, that I put on the list of those we've kind of looked at as enlightened super achievers? There's a couple of things there. There's the enlightened side. So why is it enlightened super achievers and not just super achievers or not high achievers? Believe it or not, there is an answer to that. When I first started doing these studies, I was sharing as a speaker from the stage the term high achiever, and I would notice people shut down and people just, I could tell something didn't feel right. They weren't getting excited about it like I thought they should, in the sense of, here you're learning what's taken me thousands of hours to learn, and you're not having to do that extra work. I'm giving it to you in bite-sized chunks, the high-level stuff. So why are they not getting as excited? And after I did surveys on it, I discovered it was around the word high achiever. And what it was is people had a negative connotation to that term, high achiever, because they perhaps had worked with somebody who stepped on other people on the way to the top. And so they saw like a high achiever in sales, let's say, as somebody who didn't care about anybody else. They just cared about making their numbers and making income and driving a nice car and all those kind of things. So I switched it up to super achievers and discovered I got a bit of a better response. And it still wasn't 100%, but it was much better, meaning you could tell more people were getting excited about it. And then I added the word enlightened, and it changed everything. But what it meant to me, why it was important, and this goes, and I'm going to tie this into how I feel most of them measure their achievement and how I measure their achievement. So the enlightened difference was I basically explained it that high achiever may or may not be somebody who steps on other people on the way to the top. But a true enlightened super achiever is somebody that not only doesn't step on people on the way to the top, they are the people that if they're up at the top, they'll help pull you up, and if they're below you on the rung, they'll push you up before them. They're still going to get to the top. They're still going to be thriving. They're still going to be in the top 1%ers, but they want to help other people get there too, not just themselves.
Sounds very ethical, which is a nice way of looking at life. I wish more people had that opinion.
Yeah, and it was, for me, it even was a great distinction for me to see, okay, who are the people that I admire? Who are the people that I want to ultimately emulate and become like? And so in terms of how do I, let's say this person is that, how do I say that they've had that success or had that achievement or milestone. I look at it based on impact and influence. So I don't look at it like, did they have their biggest month this month, in history or this year of the year. I look at it like, how many lives are they impacting? Do they have an invisible impact that will be seen in years to come because they are using their influence for good? They are trying to help other people thrive. They are trying to help other people become as successful as them. That's how I rate it. So you look at somebody like the late Zig Ziglar, who we interviewed a while back, or you look at somebody like, let's say, Wayne Dyer. We just interviewed his daughter, Guy Dyer, 2 weeks ago. And you look at people like that, and you realize Wayne Dyer wasn't just trying to achieve on his own. Zig Ziglar wasn't just trying to achieve on his own. They were trying to make sure that as many other people could get what they wanted from life at the same time as Zig and Wayne were getting what they wanted from life. So I look at it and say, like for Zig Ziglar, for instance, he's got, I haven't looked in a while, so I'm just throwing this number out, but I know the last time I looked, they had over 3 million people liked them or followed them on their Facebook page. Wow. And we had Tom, which is Zig's son, Ziglar, on the show multiple times, but one of the times we had him on, we talked about their fan page, the Zig Ziglar fan page, and the time we had him on, they were at 250,000, and within a year, I think they were at 1.5 million, and then within another year, now they're at over 3 million. So think about the impact he's had on many people's lives for the better. And by the way, I just looked at his page now, and he's at 4.2 million.
It's amazing.
So, and like I said, bear in mind, that's happened in literally the last few years, gone from hundreds of thousands to that, at the level of almost any celebrity you can pick. And it's not because he aimed to be a celebrity or he did anything a celebrity does. It's because his goal was to positively impact millions of lives, and clearly he did it. Gandhi, look at how many people are at his funeral because of the invisible impact he had. We just went to, a year and a half ago, we were doing an invisible impact tour. And that's a whole story on its own, but we went to Jimi Hendrix's memorial site, and we were there for an hour. Jimi Hendrix has been dead 45 years. We were there for an hour, and there were like 5 groups of people went to his memorial site to pay tribute to how he's impacted their life. But one person drove up in a little red car, jumped out with cleaning gloves on, walked around his grave site or his memorial site, cleaned up all the garbage and litter, jumped back in his little red car and drove away. And I figured out pretty quickly that person must live nearby. Obviously doesn't work for the grave sites because he isn't doing a good job if he does, because he's only cleaning one site. So I'm assuming that he just goes to Jimi Hendrix's site and cleans it every day or every other day because of Hendrix's impact on him 45 years ago.
Respect.
Yeah, so so my point is, do I measure Hendrix's ability to be a super achiever by the great music he put out? Absolutely. But do I measure it by album sales? I don't think I have to, because he's impacted so many lives, that's automatically going to impact album sales and all those other things that we use to measure success. So to me, it still comes back to impact, and are you positively influencing people for the right reasons? That's how I measure a super achiever.
Well, that's a very interesting analysis. One of the things that you're talking about as a part of this is how these super achievers go about getting the attention, the publicity, and the interest they need to build these massive followings. What do they do that's different than the average person who seems trapped in invisibility and just can't get anyone to notice them?
So, it's a two-pronged or part answer. There's more to it than this, but I'll tell you the 2 things I think that are most crucial. One is they are adding value to other people's lives. So it goes back to what I just mentioned about helping other people get what they're trying to get. So they add value to other people's lives, and what does that value look like? That can be they entertain other people. That can be they inspire other people. They motivate them. They give back. They put the spotlight on other people. So they try to find ways to give value or add value to other people. Gary Vaynerchuk, who's kind of one of the social media kings, if you will,
right,
talks about in his book, Jab, 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 Right Hook, about the importance of giving before you ever ask. And these super achievers that get more attention to them figure out the way to do that. And however they do it, they give more value, or they give more emotional value than the next people or the next person. But here's the catch. So in other words, you might say, well, then how come somebody that just starts today and maybe puts a powerful quote up that might inspire people or even bring them to tears and does it once a week, maybe for the next year, doesn't automatically have 4 million followers on social media? The other part is, so the second part I would say that's crucial is consistency. And when I say consistency, you have to decide what that consistency looks like. But for most of the people today that are crushing it, that aren't celebrities, consistency to them is meaning it's also frequency. So they have frequency and they're doing it consistently. So if they, for example, tweet, I'm just saying as an example, twice an hour, well, they tweet twice an hour, every hour, always. So it's the frequency. Can you write a blog post once a week and change the world? Yes. Can you write a blog post once a week and get 1 million followers on your blog? It's theoretically possible, but it's definitely not the majority. It's the minority case. It's not the norm. So I would say the more norm for people that become top influencers is they're consistently delivering value over and over again. And so why is that important? It's because the frequency means they're in front of the eyeballs enough to get noticed. And that's hard to do today whenever you look at Twitter. I think we had Bruce Van Horn on our show multiple times, who's a Twitter influencer, non-celebrity with 500,000 followers on his Twitter account. And, Bruce shared with us, I think, and I'm going by memory, but I think it's every 11 minutes your tweet is done. Like, even if the most powerful tweet, unless it's a major celebrity, is non-existent again after 11 minutes. So you think about it, if you had the most powerful person, the person that's adding the most powerful value with a quote or insight or what have you, unless it gets picked up by somebody who keeps retweeting it or keeps reposting it to give it the traction and it goes viral, in most cases it's going to disappear, even if it's something that should change the world. So going back to the original question, I would say it's the quality of the value they're delivering every time they post or every time they put themselves out there. And then the secondary part is it's the consistency. And if you want to add another one, the consistency gives them that visibility to get in front of the right people who can actually give them the momentum to get them to the influencer status.
It sounds to me from what you're saying based on consistency and frequently that a person has a difficult time doing that by themselves and they need a team of people to help them or some automatic software or some virtual assistants to keep their name in front of people because there's so many different platforms that you can express your opinions on. Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, 100%. And what I would say as well, first of all, you got to pick the platform that feels right to you and that you mesh the most with. But I would also add to that, Joel, is that one of the biggest regrets I have is that I didn't start focusing on directing those people to my newsletter sooner. And I finally got around to it and finally started doing it right in the last year. Now, I don't watch the numbers every day, but we're, hovering in maybe the 10,000 range. And we have a new book coming out that, without going into a long detail, based on our past routes with going with the way we've released the digital books I released. I have 11 books, 8 are hard copy, like printed in stores, that type of thing, but 3 are digital, and they've really helped add to the newsletter. It was kind of the strategy that worked for me. And I would guesstimate I'll probably have 20,000 in my newsletter by the end of the first quarter of this year.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. But and I say this as somebody who's not bragging because that 10,000 roughly that we have now, it's actually a little more than that, but that roughly 10,000, 9,000 of it occurred in the last year. So when I say these numbers, somebody might think, well, if you've been building a newsletter for a while, how could you say you'll add that much? Well, it's because the 90% of it was added in less than a year, actually like 8 months. The rest was I had a newsletter. I had those things for like 12 years and only put 1,000 people on it. And it's because I wasn't really actively trying to drive people there and I didn't have any plan for it. So going back to the original point of that is I would say the biggest mistake I made was not trying to use social media to direct people to my newsletter. And the reason why I would say it's important to direct people to your newsletter is social media is going to keep changing. Vine that came out a while back, nobody talks about it anymore. Snapchat, I'm already hearing less people talk about it. Now, I'm not saying for somebody that's huge into either of those that there's anything happening to those platforms or they're not growing. I'm just saying I'm not hearing about them as much. there's certain ones that come around that people get excited about, and then you don't hear about them as much, which makes you believe it is theoretically possible in 5 years' time Facebook won't be the brand it is today. Again, I'm not saying it won't. It won't be. I'm saying it's possible. So considering that, if you think about it, if it's possible that any platform you're using now or in the future that comes around isn't going to be the dominant one in years from now, then wouldn't it make sense that you have people in a platform or in a place where you can automatically let them know what you're doing, bring them to the new platform you're on, all those kind of things, so that you don't lose them. So to me, your newsletter is that. It's your one direct way to still reach your audience, even if you lose your audience because Facebook says you're no longer allowed on our platform because you did this or that. What I'll even add to that is think about the difference between if you're selling your product, your only, let's say, supplier is Walmart, and you're selling through Walmart, and then Walmart says, oh, your competitor offered us a better price, so we're just going to we're not going to carry your line anymore.
Right.
And let's say that was your whole business brand and your whole business model, and you don't know who those customers were that bought from you, and actually neither does Walmart really. So all of a sudden, those customers that were buying from you now disappear. Now, the next day after that happened, if Walmart was your only supplier/customer, how many customers are you going to have tomorrow? Well, if you don't do any work, you're probably going to have zero. So, but imagine if you had your product, let's say, at various different retailers, and you had your own store set up. Well, if you had your own store set up and Walmart stops carrying your product and your own store is doing well, you can obviously continue to sell through your store. Or if you had a newsletter of those clients somehow that were buying from Walmart and Walmart pulled your line, you could still go to those customers the very next day and still be able to communicate with them, hey, you can still get our product. So what I would say is don't let yourself fall into the trap of putting all your eggs into a social media platform, using that as your only channel to communicate with people, and then having something happen in your business and having no backup plan. So
that makes a lot of sense. One of the biggest trends in communication today is exactly what you and I are doing now, is the actual live or recorded interview. And it seems like the spoken word is playing a more prominent role in getting people to notice you and pay attention to you. And since you've done over 3,000 interviews, how do you use your portfolio of interviews to repurpose them to accomplish the different goals that you're interested in?
Well, it's interesting you should ask that. Maybe this is my opportunity to make myself accountable when I say this as well, Joel, but it's interesting you should ask that right at this time because we're doing, of course, our 2017 business planning right now, and this is something we want to kind of take it to the next level. So we want to go next level with repurposing. But to answer your question in a two-part answer, because we have been repurposing all along, and then I just want to go to the next level. So how do I repurpose the stuff? Well, so let's say I've done an interview. I'm going to use an example, let's say, with Mark Victor Hansen. So Jack's partner, Chicken Soup co-creator.
Right.
So I'll use that example because it's recent. So Mark, let's say we did the interview for our show. So our show, in terms of repurposing, just with the show itself, the show is available on satellite radio, Stitcher Radio, our iTunes show channel. The show's called Conversations with Passion. So we have it on conversationswithpassion.com and thepassioncure.com, two separate websites. We have it on iHeartRadio and just on and on. So we have it on your traditional, let's say, audio platform for a radio show / podcast. Then we can run it through, let's say, YouTube. We've toyed with it a bit and want to take it to the next level in that area, basically picking one of the episodes a week and putting it on YouTube with still images, unless it's an interview that we've done with video, and then we'll of course insert the actual live video for that interview if we have multiple interviews on the show, and then still photos for the others. So going back to the point is that you can repurpose it, let's say, on YouTube. So now you have a video version of your audio interview. Then I would take that Mark Victor Hansen, and you can actually see this right now on my passioncure.com. If you go under the blog, I have, I think the latest blog actually is what I learned from Mark Victor Hansen. So I'll write a short blog on what I learned from Mark Victor Hansen. Then what I'll do is I'll copy that blog and paste it into LinkedIn and use it as my LinkedIn. So my, LinkedIn now has the post you can do. So I'll use it as a LinkedIn article, essentially. With that, the blogs, I'm also linked up to blog channels that actually post each time you have a new blog is, so that's driving more people there. That's not really more repurposing. I'm just saying that's another way I'm getting to an audience. Then I'll repurpose quotes from the interview. We put those together in an image quote. Some will direct to the show. Some we'll just put up as quotes for people to share, and we'll put those on Instagram. They work really well on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. So repurposing on social media as quotes, but also then as the full interviews as well, we'll repurpose on social media so that we click people there. And then when I'm as a speaker, then I'll take quotes from the interviews or insights or wisdom from the interviews. That drives back to the Napoleon Hill side of things, and I'll share those in my speaking engagements. So now all of a sudden I'm sharing quotes or insights or a picture of me and, name us Henry Winkler, the Fonz or whatever, or Cheech and Chong, and put those on my slide and share an insight or something I learned from them. So I'll share it that way. And then I can also, if I'm writing an article for a publication, I'll insert quotes and stuff. And I usually, as that brand, I try to basically make it a what I learned from. So the articles will be insights I've learned from some of these great minds or thought leaders. That's another way that I'll repurpose it. And then finally, and these are just, this isn't all inclusive as a list, but even I mentioned the digital book that we've been putting out. Well, the first book was called Thriving, second was Enlightened, and the newest one that's coming out in the new year is called Impact. And these books are actually almost like a Think and Grow Rich or How to Win Friends and Influence People in terms of format, in the sense that it's me sharing my journey and stories about sitting with so-and-so and what I learned from so-and-so and, an insight that, say, Robin Sharma shared with me, and then I'll share what that insight means to me and how you can apply it in your life. So it's repurposed then into a book as well. So just in my answer there, if you think about just the various different repurposing options, I talked about various different audio options, video option, blog option, article option, LinkedIn, meaning LinkedIn article option, and then also even working it into a book.
No, I think those are all excellent suggestions. And the reason I asked that question is because that's pretty much what I like to do with these interviews, because I think that's the single biggest stumbling block that people have when they do a radio or a podcast interview, is they think that all they have to do is do the interview, and then magically the audience is going to appear, the telephone is going to start ringing, the books are going to start selling, and that just isn't the case.
Well, just to add another thing to that too, Joel, I'm in a strange situation myself. I know somebody hearing this is saying, "Cry me a river." Love to have this situation, but at the same time, a challenge is still a challenge. I'm in the challenging situation of having too much content. Like I have far too much content to ever, not say ever, but to ever keep up with. I'll say that. I won't say to ever share. I could share it if I was 24 hours a day just sharing the content, but I have far too much to ever keep up with. For instance, I mentioned like last week as a great example. We did interviews with Sharon Lecter, who's she worked with Robert Kiyosaki on the Rich Dad Poor Dad series.
Yeah, I've heard of her before.
So she just recently partnered with the Napoleon Hill Foundation. Think and Grow Rich for Women is the new book. So we had Sharon on the show. These are interviews that are being distributed right now. Sharon, Ami James, who's the Miami Ink. TV show. He owns the tattoo shop, Miami Ink. It was called actually Love Hate Tattoo, but he had the TV shows, Miami Ink, which turned into LA Ink, or at least spun that off, and then New York Ink. And so we had Ami as well, Wayne Dyer's daughter, Simonetta Lean, who's a huge social media influencer. And then I mentioned we also had Bruce Van Horn, who's a pretty big social media influencer in his own right. And, that's last week. During the Christmas holidays, those 5 interviews took place. So keeping up with sharing that stuff it's become the new challenge for me.
Do you have people helping you get these guests lined up for your show?
Here's the irony. So I have people on my team that help. So my assistant helps me with editing shows, posting shows, social media, all that kind of stuff. But the one thing I've never let go of yet, and I'm not saying I won't, is when it comes to sort of the, for lack of a better term, let's say the household name guest. I'll say it this way. I've had virtual assistants, and it's almost like virtual assistant is still a person. So virtual assistants and in-person assistants that I've had hired working with me, I've tried to release that to them. and it's always been a struggle. And it really is strange to me because we have the past guest names, the show ratings, all those things to back it up. But every time I leave it, I don't know if it's an energy in the writing, but the email's the same, everything's the same, but the numbers are never the same in terms of the secured interviews with that one area. So to answer the question, I haven't really let that go yet.
Well, maybe that's where you're the super achiever.
I don't know. It's really weird because I can't explain it in the sense that you would think that if everything's the same, the email, everything's the same in terms of the approach, then, it should be the same result. But it hasn't been thus far. And like I said, it's a good problem to have, but at the same time, it's a challenge too because I even have to have a system to remind me to follow up with certain big names because they'll come back and say, 4 months after you approach them, oh, sorry I didn't get back to you, this has happened, or I was on holidays, or went to this folder, and then, then you'll say, no worries, let's make it happen now, and they'll say, what date's good, and then all of a sudden you don't hear from them for another month, and so you have to have almost a system to actually even just to follow up on them because persistence is what really has made it happen and made it possible to reach some of those big names.
No, I totally agree with you. On another subject, one of the things that you have in your LinkedIn profile is you believe that in today's world, the word no is more important than the word yes. What do you mean by that?
Well, here's the weirdest segue/full circle response to an earlier question that you may ever have on your show. So I left off saying I would share the top 3 traits. And we only shared one of them. So this is perfect because I don't want to leave the interview with somebody come back saying, hey, where are the other 2? Uh-huh. So this comes back to the number 2 most common trait. I'll tell you there's one trait, I'll share it if you want at the very end, that I'm leaving out altogether because it's so common. I don't even say it anymore because most people inherently that are achievers have it in common anyway, but I'm happy to share it. But anyway, number 2, if I look at just the traits that kind of are close to each other. Number 2 is the understanding the power of saying no. So you can sort of tie that into going all in because the people that go all in and are focused are actually saying no to the things trying to interrupt them. But it's a bit different when it comes to the power of saying no that I'm talking about. I'm talking about even inherently we want to say yes to everybody as people. I mean, I'm not saying everybody does, I'm generalizing, but I grew up in a small meat and potatoes type town where I was kind of taught, say yes to everything and then figure out how to do it. Just be nice to everybody, make everybody happy, never say no to somebody, it's wrong to say no, and all those kind of things. And then I go and start doing these interviews and discover that I'm hearing no more than I'm ever hearing yes because these enlightened super achievers, they have to live by only saying yes to the things that are going to move them or their purpose forward. So what I did is I actually created my own mission statement, a personal mission statement that would allow me to decide when to say no and when to say yes. Because I found the biggest challenge people had is it's one thing to start understanding the importance of saying no. It's another thing realizing what to say no and yes to. So I tried to give people a strategy. So for me, I figured out my purpose. It took me a while to put it together. You can call it my purpose or mission statement. Mm-hmm. And it's essentially I want to be the guy who donates, motivates, inspires, educates, and entertains. So those are my 5 sort of test systems. So if you said to me, Corey, hey, I want to partner on this. I mean, right now I have 3 influencers that reached out to me and said, hey, I loved our interviews. I think we can make some magic happen together. We should release a product together. What do you think? And 6 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, it would have been yes instantly. I would have jumped on it because, here's a chance to partner with somebody that has millions of followers and that's reaching out to me and asking me to do it. It's not even me trying to approach them and beg and what have you. But yet I have to ask, is it going to help me realize, let's say, 4 or 5 of those areas that I mentioned? Mm-hmm. So is it going to help me give back? So the donating side. Is it going to help me entertain? Is it going to help me inspire people? So I have to ask that. So what happens is now when things come on my plate or come in front of me, I ask those questions. Is it going to be one of those 5? If it's less than 3, it's almost always a no. And it's a no without regret. I've turned down TV show spots now because of knowing that they weren't going to work with any of those situations. I turned down speaking engagements because they wanted me to basically, I was getting in front of a big audience, but they wanted me to essentially speak for free, then make a bunch of money from my talk. They said, you can't, we don't want you to try to inspire people. We just want you to do this or that. And I realized that it was only one of those 5 things. So it wasn't a fit for me. I'll let somebody else figure out if it's a fit for them. But back to the original point, so the power of saying no. Once I understood the power of it, then I set that system in place. And I think if anybody listening does that, they'll see a transformation in their life. If they sit down and say, what is my core purpose? What am I trying to do? And then put that into terms of a mission statement or whatever that looks like. All great companies have a mission statement. You should have one too. So put a mission statement together and then ask yourself each time a new request comes up, is it going to help me serve my purpose or is it going to take me further away from it? And that'll allow you to decide what to say yes and no to. But you would ask, I believe, is more important than yes. I do 100% because I feel that most people that are achieving at the highest level are saying no to many, many things that aren't getting them towards their core purpose so that they can say yes to that one or two precious few things that will get them towards their core purpose. So I do believe it's huge and crucial, and I hope that's a strategy somebody can use for deciding how to say no and how to say yes. To say no and yes.
It's a good point. Plus, you're also entering into it a time element because you only have so much time in the day, the week, the month, and now we're into a new year. So you have to focus on what's most important to you because when you're saying yes, sometimes it's almost no different than opening up your email inbox where you've got 3,000 emails and you don't even have time to go through them.
Absolutely. And you know what, Joel, in terms of not having time, one of the things I heard in an interview recently, this was the number they threw out there. I don't know if they were just randomly throwing a number, if there was any science behind it, but they said that based on a recent study, was how I heard it on the interview. I was just listening to the Drive Time Radio. They said all the information that's online is now doubling every 12 months.
I know. I heard that.
So I don't know if that number is accurate, but let's just even say for argument's sake, even if it wasn't accurate, we still know it's increasing exponentially. So the question becomes, if you can't keep up today, how are you going to keep up in 5 years' time? And so the importance of saying no, and the people that know how to say yes to the right things, I think is going to become a trait or a strategy or an ability that is going to determine the future thought leaders. That's my personal belief.
Well, I think you're 100% right, and the way I can apply it to my own background and my own experience is that for most of my life I was in the construction business. We installed glass and metal in buildings, and we specialized in one phase of the business, and we became what we felt was the best at it in our city, which was Chicago, and there were a lot of other parts of the business that we basically said no to. We didn't even want any part of. And what happened over the years is we got known for this specialized group of activities we did, and it propelled us far further than if we had tried to be all things to all people in our industry. That's pretty much what you're saying, in a business standpoint, that sometimes as a businessman or a business owner, you have to know how to micro-specialize in order to be a super achiever. You think that's a valid point?
Yeah, so I'll say it this way, and this is a question I get often, and this is kind of one of those areas where I'd love to have an answer that, yes, absolutely, I think everybody should find their niche and stick to it, but I'm going to say I think as well there's a double-edged sword or a double-edged answer to this. So if I'm trying to be accurate, so there's the one side of being, let's say, a niche marketer or a niche-focused person, let's say like a Seth Godin, who your listeners might know of, is the author of The Purple Cow,
right,
and The Dip, and he's, I would say, fairly niche-focused. He's kind of the marketing guy. I would say he's the think-outside-the-box marketing guy, and I'd say he's known as that. And you can go down a list of people that are micro-focused like that as speakers, and then start to go, okay, well, is that the answer? Is that what we should be doing if we want to be that next sort of thought leader that people seek out? So what I'll say, first of all, to that side, if I look at the pluses of both, there's to that side, realistically, it's a lot easier to market yourself if you're only focused on one area. So if you're the radio expert, the person that helps people get radio interviews, like teaches people how to maybe secure interviews, like we were talking about earlier, then that'll definitely become your niche or focus. You could argue, I guess I could argue that my niche focus is helping people realize how to get to the top 1%, how to join those Enlightened Super Achievers. So if you said that was my niche and that was my only focus, then marketing-wise, that's a lot easier for me. So if you go to Seth Godin, the way he markets himself, him being that marketer, then that's a lot easier to brand yourself and get yourself in front of people, because everybody goes, oh, well, who's Seth Godin? Oh, he's the guy that does the purple cow thing. He's the marketer. He's that guy. Or, who's Corey? And we talk about, oh, he's the modern-day Napoleon Hill. He interviews people and shares that insight with other people. However, so that on one side, that's a positive. So would I say that that's beneficial? Yes. However, would I say that's the only answer? No. So then we can go to the other side. The people that I, let's say, admired when I was growing up, the people who inspired me to get into this industry, the people that I think have impacted so many lives. We were talking about some of them earlier. You start thinking about a Zig Ziglar. You start thinking about Wayne Dyer. You start thinking about Tony Robbins, Jack Canfield. And what I would challenge people to tell me is what's their niche? In other words, what is Jack Canfield's niche? And I think what you'll find is people start getting into a generalized area like success. He helps people become successful. But I think you and I both know there's a lot of people that are in the realm of personal development helping people become successful.
Right.
And by the way, I would put myself more in the category of these people I'm talking about now than the niche person. I was just using the example. My talks, I speak on customer service regularly. I speak on how to find your passion. I speak on communication. So I would say I'm more of a generalist as, let's say, a speaker. Well, I would say also Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, Jack Canfield, those people are also generalists. And I don't mean it obviously in a negative. I mean it in a positive. So Tony Robbins is kind of the peak performance guy. But he can go to any event pretty much and speak. He can speak on marketing in relation to peak performance. He can go speak on business in relation to peak performance or real estate. But he still, kind of speaks on generalist areas. How do you become a peak performer in your trade? And so these people have impacted millions of lives by not necessarily saying, I'm only the guy who speaks to realtors on home equity. So I would essentially say I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think a niche area is one option, and it's an option that can be very highly successful. And I would actually encourage people, if they are in love with only one thing in relation to their industry, then, hey, go all in. But then the flip side is understand that you won't reach as many people, and you probably can't impact as many people as if you were a generalist. However, if you're a generalist in whatever trade you're in, know as well it's going to be a lot harder to get branded as the go-to person for XYZ, because people have a hard time explaining exactly what you do. So that was a long answer, but does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, because what you just described is how people identify what their passion and their purpose is, and how they can narrow it down to at least a theme. Like I'm working with a guy named Bill Barron, and he asked me a question this week, which is interesting. He said, what is your theme for 2017? What is your purpose? And I see that you talk a lot about that. And how do people identify their theme or their purpose? Because there are a lot of people who don't even know where to begin. What do they do to identify a direction for them to go in?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Joel, one little tiny quick thing I'll mention is, as far as, because I don't want to leave that other, the other side, the niche thing, open-ended. I'll say I have one little tiny super quick thing. I'll say it can be different as well as it relates to your product offering, if you're offering, let's say, a product, or if you become a large global company, because you got to recognize that most of the top companies that have remained dominant leaders in their industry are known for one thing.
Right.
Monster makes the big energy drinks. Red Bull makes the small ones. You can go to Coca-Cola we know Coca-Cola makes pop. Apple made Apple computers. They branched out a little bit, but they didn't really say, okay, we're going to be the company that goes out and services your computers and makes 7 different types of software that we're going to sell you, and et cetera, et cetera. So they stayed within their niche area. So, it's important to say, as an individual, I think you can choose either route, but as a company, if you have too many products, you'll dilute yourself, and people will really have a hard time deciding what you make, and it'll be a hard time being a leader in one of those product areas. So just on a marketing point of view, I think it's important to add that in. In terms of purpose and passion, interestingly enough, I told you I wanted to make sure I shared the other common trait, in relation to the top achievers. So it's not passion, but I'm going to explain how that ties in. So I'll share the other one because I don't want to forget to mention it. We've discovered that lifelong learners are leaders. So the people that continue to feed their mind long after the school is done, those are the people that traditionally stay at or rise at the top. So your ability to figure out what to feed your mind and to feed your mind regularly will set you apart from your peers almost every day of the week. You know, the people that have learning plans in place, that realize the importance of watching a TED Talk, you know, maybe every third day, or reading a certain amount of time a week, or what have you. As long as they're feeding themselves the right stuff, we've discovered those people traditionally get to and stay at the top. So I just wanted to add that in. But now the passion component, how does that tie in? Well, I mentioned there was one area I wasn't even going to mention. It's passion. So above and beyond all those other areas. And the reason I don't list it as a trait as often is because, as you said, people you have to find it, you have to uncover it. It's a little different. The other area is you can start reading books tomorrow. And if reading's not your thing, or if you haven't you struggle with reading, you can listen to shows, podcasts like this. You have lots of options. You can start tomorrow saying no. You just have to have strategies for doing it. You can start to go all in. You can actually turn your phone on vibration or forward or what have you. Leave it in the car. So you can do all those things. The passion one, it's not as easy as you can just start living your passion tomorrow in most cases. So that one, interestingly enough, though, is so far above and beyond the others in terms of commonality that I could say the top three traits I just shared with your audience, you could combine the three of them, and the numbers are just barely close to the percentages of people in our list of high achievers that are living their purpose. In other words, it's literally 100%. It's almost negligible, the amount of people we've discovered that are enlightened super achievers that actually aren't living on purpose. So I guess you could say it's so crucial that it's almost, it's the most common element, and it's almost necessary and an essential for you to have discovered or uncovered your passion and living on purpose if you want to be an enlightened super achiever. That's pretty much almost a written rule. So what I will say, the good news is a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners have already found their passion. You know, that's usually their business. That's why they'll go into business on, with a lack of cash flow and every reason to think the business is going to basically go belly up the next day, and still the day after that be excited that tomorrow is going to be a better day. So I would say a large majority of entrepreneurs, if they've wanted to business for themselves and they've risked everything, they probably have discovered it's their passion or they have a good inkling. But that doesn't mean I can leave the question unanswered. So how does a person start that process or journey? This is I'm going to say 1 Minute Reader's Digest version of what I actually facilitate as a full day training, as an ongoing retreat, as even a 45-minute keynote. So this is the real short version. So people have to do a lot of this on their own, whereas I try to help them normally. But to answer the question, what I traditionally take people through is I get them to get a pen and a piece of paper out. I mean, they can do this any way they want. They don't have to have a pen and a piece of paper, but let's say pen and a piece of paper. Start making a list of the things you would do if you won the lottery and money wasn't an issue. What are the things you would do, you did when you were a child, money wasn't an issue, and they got you excited. So I have a client of mine who used to teach her teddy bears bookkeeping. She'd write it on an easel and teach it to her teddy bears, and lo and behold, today she runs an accounting firm. Not many people would be doing the teaching teddy bears accounting, so that was probably a real big hint to her of where her passion area was. So write down the things that you did as a kid when money wasn't an issue usually. Write down, like I said, the things you would do if you won the lottery, because even if you go to the beach to retire, you'd probably get bored a week later and come back to civilization looking for something to do.
You're right.
What are the things that you think you would love to do and be good at? What are the things that you do now and time stands still and you don't look at the clock and you just want to keep doing more of it and you could never stop doing it? So build that list, and now you have a list of whatever the number, 8 things, let's say, and now you have the list of them. What I would say is go in order and say, what are the things that you could never lose? Those are the top of the list. What are the things that if you stop doing them tomorrow, your world wouldn't come to an end? And then what I tell people is then now what you have to do is you have this list of what's probably your passion area. So go one step further and start tackling them. Start going through them, figuring out what steps you have to take to actually jump into that passion area and take those steps. Because even if it takes you 3 months of trying the steps, let's say, to eventually get yourself on a stand-up comedy stage, and those steps might be interviewing other comics, They might be going to a Toastmaster group and learning how to speak in public. They might be just trying your hand at stand-up comedy in front of family members. You make the list, you try those steps, and if it takes you 3 months to find your passion or uncover it, if you will, because it's already probably inside you, that's still a lot quicker than the number of people, which is a large percentage of people, who go their whole life without ever finding their passion. So I would tell people, take those steps. Write it down on a piece of paper, figure out what things you think might be your passion or purpose areas, and then start taking action on those. And I feel you'll probably uncover or discover fairly quickly which ones of those are truly your purpose.
Thank you, Corey. That was a very good question. For more information on Corey, visit CoreyPoirier.com. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Main Street Mavericks Radio. Have a little fun today. Don't save it up. Until next time, this is Joel Helfer wishing you a great day.
You've been listening to Main Street Mavericks Radio with Joel Helfer. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit mainstreetmavericks.com.